Welcome to Radnor High School. Breaking news! Today we will face the issue of auditing. Why is it banned? Are high schoolers mature enough to handle it? Why should teenagers be discouraged from gaining more knowledge? You may be wondering, what is auditing? Well, it's simply when a student takes a class without receiving a grade or credit. A student often audits a course for the purpose of learning without the stress of assessment. Auditing is often recommended in higher academia, such as college and graduate school, but at Radnor High School it is not permitted. In the Radnor Student Handbook, it is succinctly stated that, quote, students are not permitted to audit courses at this time. Analysis of this controversial statute by three famous philosophers. Give it up for our first philosopher, Jeremy Bentham.
Hello, thank you for having me. I am very happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Back in the 18th century, I was an English philosopher who many of you may know as the founder of utilitarianism.
Welcome. Now let's welcome a philosopher with a conflicting perspective. Please welcome Immanuel Kant.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on the show today. I am eager to spread my views in the world.
And last but certainly not least, please give your attention to the American political philosopher, John Rawls.
Thanks, announcer. I'm very excited to be here.
All right, folks, let's get to it. Mr. Bentham, can you start us off with your opinion on the matter?
I believe that the rule against auditing is justifiable because auditing classes would just not be practical. The majority of high school students are not mature enough to audit a class solely for educational purposes. It is likely that the reason high school students would audit a class is to be with their friends, which would detract from the class as a whole and create extra work for the teacher.
Mr. Bentham, I do believe that high school students are mature enough to appreciate the educational purposes of auditing a class, and therefore they should be allowed the opportunity to do so. Students should be commended for wanting to expand their knowledge without credit, and I see no reason why auditing should be banned. Why must a student be mature to audit a class anyway? What if the class they are auditing is meant to make them more mature?
Mr. Kant brings up a good point. All forms of education should be widely available, since everyone has the right to knowledge. Teenagers should learn as much as they can in high school, and the school rules should enable this instead of prevent it. The large amount of different classes offered at Radnor make it impossible for someone to take every one, so students should be able to learn from different classes without the added pressure of a grade. Every person deals with stress differently, and some people are better at handling extra work from extra classes than others. We should not put those who cannot handle the workload of a certain course behind those who can. Everybody should have access to the teachings of any class, even if they cannot handle the work.
Wow, Mr. Rawls, I have never thought of it that way. Could you give us an example of this?
Of course. Let's say a person struggles with managing their time or stress. To combat this issue, they schedule a few study halls each day, but want to add another language that they are interested in learning, yet cannot manage the extra pressure of another class. This person should be allowed to learn another language by sitting in a class and listening, instead of letting the stress of grades prevent them from satisfying their intellectual curiosity. Now, Bentham, can you tell me a good reason why this person should not be allowed to audit?
Mr. Rawls, I believe that even though this person has a perfectly respectable reason for wanting to audit classes, if auditing were allowed, there would be so many people who take advantage of the rule, and it would be very rare to find people like this person who audit purely for the pursuit of knowledge. It just does not make sense to me, as it will only benefit a few people, but the disruptions it causes will affect the entirety of many classes, which will create much more work for all of the teachers.
Mr. Bentham, with all due respect, I think you are taking the wrong approach. We cannot get too caught up with the people who would take advantage of the auditing privileges, but instead should focus on those like the person Mr. Rawls pointed out, who will use auditing to become more enlightened individuals. What is important is that allowing auditing will enable people to gain knowledge, and this is a very honorable pursuit. If we are always worrying about the possible negative effects of an action, then we will never be able to do the right thing. The consequences of auditing should not concern us as much as the morality of the reason for allowing it, which is to support the fundamental benefit of education.
Mr. Rawls and Mr. Kant, while what you are saying is true, you simply cannot ignore the fact that allowing auditing will cause some serious disruptions in the classroom. Even if you claim that we should not focus on the costs, they still demand attention. Let's say a single person benefits from the auditing rule by trying to learn, but dozens of classes are disrupted by people whose only agenda is to hang out with their friends while auditing classes. How can you say that we should still permit auditing if the detriment to the many outweighs the benefits to the few?
Mr. Bentham, the relative risks and benefits may be as you presented, but they should not be our primary concern in deciding whether to permit auditing. The reason to permit auditing is to enable people to gain more knowledge, and no matter the potential consequences, this itself is a very honorable purpose.
Sorry, Mr. Bentham, but I'm going to have to agree with Mr. Cate on this one. Even though his reasoning differs from mine, I believe that auditing should be permitted.
Mr. Rawls, how exactly does your reasoning differ?
Well, I do believe that auditing should be permitted, and I can also understand Cate's reasoning. But my reasoning is that it should be permitted so everyone can have an equal starting point. Like I said earlier, people who handle stress and work better are more likely to take more classes than people who do not handle it as well. Everyone should be able to have access to the same amount of knowledge, no matter how well they can deal with the work and pressures of an official class.
Wow, you guys are all very, very wise. I see where each one of you is coming from, but do you think it is possible to try and reason with each other? Mr. Bentham, although your ideas do not seem to be too popular tonight, you do have a point. Why don't we try to compromise?
This is what I propose. We should permit auditing with several adjustments, such as a minimum GPA to have the privilege of auditing, a requirement that auditing can only take place during study halls or free periods, or a requirement that a student wishing to audit a class receive the consent of the teacher in advance.
If only the serious students with a high GPA are able to audit, then they will tend to take auditing more seriously than others. This will eliminate the students who only audit for non-educational purposes and are distracting to the class, so the administrative burden will be much less. However, I'm not quite sure whether these rules will work. If only students with a high GPA are able to audit, that may cause some people to become jealous of those who are able to audit and have a high GPA. By creating this rule, it will become apparent which students are intelligent and which are not as intelligent, just by seeing who is auditing classes. This may cause students a lot of unhappiness if all of their friends are permitted to audit and they are not. They also may become jealous and mad at their friends. In this case, the auditing rule and its guidelines would just create more trouble than it is worth.
Very interesting thought, Mr. Bentham. Thank you for sharing. Mr. Rawls, what are your views on requiring students to have a GPA above a certain level in order for them to be allowed to audit?
I disagree. All students should be allowed to audit no matter their GPA. Students should not be judged by their GPA because people are born with a certain level of intelligence, certain talents, and a certain drive, and they did nothing to deserve any of these qualities. People who did not get such favorable traits and do not have as high of a GPA should not be put at a disadvantage because they did not win the genetic lottery. If anything, the people with a high GPA should be required to tutor those who do not. They should not be given any more educational advantages that will put those who are less intelligent even farther behind. Auditing a class could also be used to give a struggling student a boost. For example, they could retake a class they did not fully understand. Everyone should be able to enjoy the benefits of auditing a course in effort to expand or refresh their knowledge.
Do any of you have any views on the way the rule was stated? It seems kind of peculiar how there are no reasons provided to support it.
The rule was stated in a very direct way. There were no elaborations. All that was stated was the basic principle. Quote, students are not permitted to audit courses at this time. I think it's interesting how no reasons were provided. Maybe it's because there are none. The most important part of establishing a good rule is having solid reasons to support it. For other rules in the handbook, such as the dress code, many reasons are provided for why the rule is necessary. If there are no reasons to support the rule, then maybe the rule is not justifiable.
Even though no reasons are stated, it does not necessarily mean that there are no reasons. Perhaps the handbook doesn't need to state reasons for this particular topic because they think the reasons why auditing should not be permitted are so obvious.
Upon entering Radnor High School every day, you have consented to a social contract in which each student is expected to follow the guidelines laid out for them. but the rules are not necessarily just. It is a crucial function of society to modify the laws in order to better the society. No reasons are stated, which detracts from the authority of the rule. If there are no reasons, why should students be required to follow the rules? People feel more compelled to follow rules that have rational explanations rather than ones that are simply no. If a government is made up of laws without logical reasoning, then what is the point of the law?
Wow, what a compelling conversation. But unfortunately, our time together is just about up. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Bentham, Mr. Rawls, and Mr. Cate. You all for tuning in. Until next time on Radnor High School Breaking News.